Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is WeatherBrains episode number 725 for the 9th of December, 2019. This is James. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this week. And I think you know what this is. This is the pre-show, that magical time of the show where we do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and occasionally we say some very outrageous things. And it just dawned on me that I have not fed the radio files for tomorrow. For those that don't know, I do weather on commercial radio stations across the country. And typically on Monday nights, I'll do their weather cuts a little earlier than usual and feed them before the show. So they'll be there in place late tonight, early tomorrow morning for their morning shows. And I typically do that before I start this, but I'm doing that now. And now we've got to get the embed code here, and we'll get everybody online. So y'all hang tight. Got possibility of a few snowflakes down here in the deep south tomorrow night. So anytime we have 3 flakes of snow, it's a big deal. And hopefully it's not going to be much of an issue. Really and truly, where we are, it has been quiet in terms of severe weather. This is the late fall, early winter severe weather season, and it has been remarkably quiet so far this year. So we are very fortunate in that regard. And I will say, where we are down here, we are statistically overdue for an ice storm. We get those from time to time down here, and they are just nasty. The last really big one was in 1996. That's a long time. And the last catastrophic ice storm was in 1982. So I'm afraid that at some point our luck's going to run out. But let's invite our regulars on the show here. So here we go. We're going to invite Mr. Murray. And I know we've got some out tonight. Dr. John, I think, has had a sinus infection. He has been out. And I do believe Troy Kimmel is out tonight. He teaches some classes, and I think he's got finals, and he's kind of in a busy time here. And sad to hear that Kevin had a death in his family. I believe his mother-in-law passed away couple of days ago. So he is out. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I believe that's everybody. So let's get them invited. We'll see if they can make this puppy fly. And I did not even bring up Chrome. The first couple of times we did Zoom, and typically my daily driver browser is Safari on Mac OS, just because it doesn't take as much battery power when you're running on battery, and it just integrates better with the system, and it seems to be a little more private and secure. But I did not go to Chrome, and it's actually working. So I guess you don't have to have Chrome to open up a Zoom conference. And really, Zoom is a separate little applet that runs on its own, independent of the browser, which makes sense. So let's see here. I think we are on the air. Yep. All right. So we're good to go. Don't remember 2 weeks ago, if you watched this, it got to be like a minute before showtime. Not a soul was on this thing but me. So that was a little creepy. So we'll see if we can do that tonight. And if that's the case, that's okay. I'll just go on a 90-minute tirade or rant or something. We can do that. Had to read a couple of books tonight at a Christmas event for kids and their parents, and that was wild. It was packed at the Rossbridge Resort, and we had all kind of kids and mamas and daddies in there, and it was fun. But, man, it was packed. I mean, I had to work my voice loud in that place. They do that in the lobby of this beautiful resort hotel here every year, and we typically do that on the second Monday night, which is tonight. So I slipped down there and did that between the evening newscast and this. All right, so I think I've invited everybody. Let me double check. There we go. Bill's on here, so we're safe. Whenever Bill shows up, we're safe. And I got your message, and I'm going to call you tomorrow. I got to drive 2 hours to Athens and speak. So I got 4 hours of phone time. So I'll call you tomorrow.
Woo-hoo. Yeah, we can do it. It's very minor. It's just to.
Yeah, nice. I had to go read a book to some kids at Ross Bridge tonight, and that was wild. But anyway, yeah, tomorrow I'm speaking at a high school in Athens, Alabama.
Woo-hoo.
And they're excited because they might see 22 snowflakes tomorrow. So that'll be interesting talk up there. And then
wait, did they close schools already?
Not yet. This is one that starts in the evenings, so I don't know if they'll have the opportunity to close.
Don't give them any ideas.
I feel like I asked this question last week.
We have to watch it. We don't close till we see the whites of the eyes on this one, or the white on the ground, one or the other. I still cannot change my settings, and I just am so frustrated. Help me, tech team here. I don't see anywhere to change settings inside the app.
If you go to the mute button down there and click that little up arrow, it gives you the opportunity to select your microphone and your speaker. So there you go.
Well, I am now. If I just set my AirPods up correctly, so that they're working better. See, that's how you do it, right, James? You stick them out straight out. Is that how you do it? No.
I don't know, but we've kind of lost your audio now.
Nobody's listening to me.
I do not do that.
Yeah, about to say that sounded really bad.
I've got terrible bandwidth.
Yeah, and you have a bandwidth issue, it looks like.
Really bad bandwidth.
If you've got gigabit Ethernet, gigabit fiber at your house, and somebody's sucking down some big time bandwidth there.
Ooh, it says my internet connection is unstable.
It sounds like you're on a 1200 baud modem. We got to get Bill a better internet connection and a mic. You still got a microphone? You used to have a mic. Have you still got an external mic?
Well, it won't work with the new Mac, so I just tossed it.
So you're using
my USB bridge.
Using the AirPods for your audio?
I am right this second. Right now, I'm trying to close things to make sure we have the best bandwidth possible. How about now? No better?
We'll just have to wait and see. It seems very constrained, as though somebody in your house is sucking down all his band. He just hung up on us.
Check the kids.
No, he's got some bonehead kids playing,
Video games.
Call of Duty or whatever the hot video game is. So, see, Roberta, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you fine.
Okay. Where are you located?
I am located south of Mobile, Alabama, obviously.
Okay. You down there where Forrest Gump used to go fishing, huh?
Not that far.
Okay. Biola Battery.
Jeff is the other one. He's the mayor of Dolphin Island. He's probably closer than I am.
Mayor, how you can you hear us okay?
I sure can.
This is awesome, man. I'm honored. Dolphin Island's one of my happy places.
There you go. It's
one of our happy places too.
It's turned into a lot of people's happy place.
I'm afraid it's going to go down the tubes if too many people have it as their happy place. It's going to become another Gulf Shores over there.
We have to get them to sign a paper that when they leave, they don't tell anybody where they've been. See, so.
Oh man. I guess maybe I can share during the show. I can share my Hurricane Frederick story. This was before you two were born.
No.
That was an interesting event That was my very first week. And by the way, first off, we're going to hit TV here in 10 seconds. We hit the TV side at 30 after the hour, and then we'll get the show started here. So we're about 8 seconds away from television. So let me kind of welcome them. And hello, welcome to our television viewers. You know what this is? It's Monday night. It's 8:30 Central. This is WeatherBrains, the weekly show all about weather. And we're about to get started here in just a momento. So Aubrey, Bill just went away. If he doesn't come back, we'll have to conduct this interview here.
Tired.
And you guys don't want us doing the interview because we're and if you don't know, Aubrey and I are working television jobs while doing this show. Bill does not have that burden. So typically Bill does the interviews because we are somewhat multitasking here. All right, George.
Yes.
Hello.
Good evening. How are you?
Good. Where are you located?
Mobile, Alabama.
Man, we got a South
crew.
Alabama show tonight. This makes me happy. I bet you guys in Mobile have never heard where I'm from, never heard of this town. But I'm from a small town between Montgomery and Mobile called Greenville.
Oh,
And if you have ever dared to venture north, which you probably haven't, and there's no reason to venture north from Mobile, but if you ever do, you go through Greenville. So, in fact, my bestest buddy from Cub Scouts is the mayor, a guy named Dexter McClendon. So he has done a great job.
He's the current mayor?
Yes, he is the current mayor. He's attracted a lot of businesses that are suppliers to the big Hyundai plant in Montgomery. In fact, I spoke to their Chamber of Commerce banquet a few years ago, and it was an amazing, eclectic mix of people for rural South Alabama. So he's done a great job. All right, so I'm going to try and pull up the notes here. We'll get the show
he's
started in just a
back.
second.
He's
Ooh,
back.
he is back. Oh, good.
Just in time.
Bill, we thought you hung up and ran on us.
We were
I
sweating.
would never do that to these guests. I might do it to you.
Oh yeah, to us, not just not
Yeah,
to
to
the
us,
guests.
not-
But to you, Span, I would hang up. The other
Exactly.
guests. This is going to be one of my favorite shows of all time. So I'm looking-
No, I can tell. I mean, I'm happy. Goodness, I could talk about Mobile, Dauphin Island. I could talk about those places all day.
I know.
Everybody's got stories. All right, let's get this thing started here because we are slightly tardy. So recorders are going, and here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And hang on, I got the
Nothing
volume
happened.
turned down. So yeah,
Wah,
that's great.
wah.
That's called a false start. Here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is WeatherBrains episode number 725. This is the weekly show all about weather. We're doing this on December 9th, 2019. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. And we had a lot of folks out, Aubrey. Got all these emails were rolling in today of some of the regulars that are out. We got Dr. John, who's been ill. We have Troy Kimmel, who is grading papers tonight.
Yep.
We
Final
have,
season.
yeah, it's the finals. And accordingly, Nate Johnson, I'm sure, is out for the same reason. We had some sad news about Kevin. It was his mother-in-law that passed away, right?
That's right.
I met her once. I was actually at Kevin's wedding back in Virginia, way back in the 90s, and a very sweet lady. And we hate to hear of her passing, but he obviously is out. But Aubrey, we're here
Yes, we are.
dancing tonight.
No. I think it's like my first Monday without dancing.
And that's a good show title.
What was,
No,
what was the new scam you were running after the second week, Aubrey? I mean the new thing you were doing?
It was
What'd
the
you call it? A scam?
I was just kidding.
it was the lip sync battle. I
There
Pinned-
you go.
I
When
pinned
do we get to see the results of that?
well, I posted the video. I can send you the video, but that video I put up on my Facebook page and I pinned 2 pictures. The pictures came out really good. Those are at the top of my Twitter page. What a
We
fun
didn't
group.
get a chance to help you raise any money. What
I didn't have to raise any money.
Oh,
So she took care of all that money. I'm not sure how much she raised. She came in 3rd place. But they had the voting system where Dancing with the Stars was $1 a vote equals $1, and it was very simple that way. They did it differently, where it was $5 equals 15 votes, and then there were like bonus votes on the night of, and it was a whole crazy shenanigans. But the whole thing raised more than $50,000, which they
Good,
basically raised in 1 year what they did the last 4 years. So that was really great, and that was for arts and education.
That is awesome.
So that was cool.
Very cool. Well, Bill Murray, your bandwidth is just fine. What'd you do? But in the pre-show, you were struggling. Now it's like
I was
just
at the
perfect.
office today, and I think it was unhappy that I was on one internet today, and that's my theory, at least. I'm on tonight, but
All right.
I only had 3 megs up. That's really weird.
Well, you're loud and clear now. It looks
It's
good.
improved a lot here in the last few minutes. I don't.
All right. Well,
I thought it was-
bring in our guest. I can't
Yeah,
wait to
I'm
start
so
this show.
excited, James, because I had the pleasure of seeing a very special film at the Fairhope Film Festival about a month ago. This is one of the most underrated film festivals in the country. The people who program it put together a stunning lineup every year. A great diversity of films. They have a lot of family interest. It's just a fun thing to go to. We take the entire family. They, miss a day of school, and we watch films for 3 days. But my favorite film of the entire festival was something called Flight of the Frigate Bird. And I knew it was going to be good, but at the end, I was just blown away by how good it was. And tonight we have the director of the Mobile Bay National Estuary Program. She directed this film, I think. You might correct me there, Roberta, but the Flight of the Frigate Bird, about the lessons learned from development on Alabama's Great Barrier Island, Dauphin Island. And we have her with us tonight, and we're really proud to have Roberta Swan. Roberta, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I went up after the movie and introduced myself, and you're probably like, who is this crazy guy? But, I just thought this really fit our mission here on WeatherBrains, and, has a real home story for our folks in Alabama, and a real national and world story for all of our listeners all over the country and the world. So thank you for being here tonight. Tell us about your program a little bit, the National Estuary Program there. What do y'all do?
Sure. The Mobile Bay National Estuary Program was organized back in 1995, and we're one of 28 programs across the United States and Puerto Rico. And our job mainly is to engage all of the different interests in our coastal community that value our estuary and value our coastal habitats and our coastal way of life. So in a nutshell, we promote the wise stewardship of the water quality and living resources of Alabama's estuaries. And an estuary is where the fresh water from the rivers running through the state of Alabama meet with the salt water of the Gulf. And
now, what was your role in the film exactly? Because I probably butchered that a second ago, Roberta.
My role in the film, I guess you could say it was a little bit of everything. It was conceived during my time when I lived on Dauphin Island, and I got to know a lot of the islanders, people that had, grown up on the island generation after generation. And I heard lots of stories about what it was like living on Dauphin Island way, back in the day. And then when I got the job with the estuary program, and I was doing a lot more environmental work and started learning about sea level rise and issues related to changing climates, it seemed like the islanders really had this intrinsic relationship with the island, and they knew how to be resilient before the rest of us even knew what the word was. So I just felt like there was a story to be told, and wrote it and produced it. I don't know if you could say I directed it. I guess I directed it. But made it happen after 6 years of filming and losing a couple of our actors along the way. Mayor Collier was a real inspiration in wanting to document some of the oral histories on the island. So it was a confluence of things that came together to create the film that we have, all the way down to having Shelby Lynn narrate it. Because
she was outstanding. What's her background, Roberta?
Well, she spent some time growing up down in South Mobile County, so she had a very strong connection to the area. So when we reached out to her and asked her if she would be willing to narrate, she didn't miss a beat. She said, absolutely, I would love to do it. And she was really generous with her time to help us do that. So,
well, it really added a lot to the film. There's no question. Our family went to Gulf Shores all the time when I was a kid. And then somewhere about 1975, we decided to go to Dauphin Island one summer. And that time there at that Holiday Inn that, I mean, was literally right on the water. I ate my first fried shrimp, and, you know, we had a ball there, and that there was already a bridge there. Tonight we have the mayor of Dauphin Island, Jeff Collier, and you've already referred to him there, Roberta. Mayor, talk about Dauphin Island today versus Dauphin Island back then, 1975, 76, that time period.
Well, first of all, I'm a lifelong Dauphin Island native. I've lived here my whole life, 58 years so far and counting. I've actually served as mayor now for a little over nearly 22 years. I actually got elected when the town first became a municipality in 1988, and I've served as an elected official that whole time. You know, I actually was born after the first bridge was built to Dauphin Island. I did, of course, my parents, grandparents, and others were here, and I heard a lot of stories. I actually didn't get to experience life here on the island, but I've heard a lot of stories. And essentially what you had, you know, the old thing about a man, well, everybody would like to live on an island. And at that time, it was probably around no more than a couple of hundred people, all pretty well related, most likely. And they just had the whole island to themselves. You know, I remember my dad always saying, he said, you know, nobody had any money, but they had a lot to eat. And of course, at that time with the seafood, a bountiful seafood, and of course, on the island, they had their own livestock and chickens. They raised gardens and things of that nature. And so, as he said, they had plenty to eat. Of course, in today, if you hop in today's world, you know, once the bridge was built in 1955, that connected Dauphin Island to the mainland and to civilization, if you will, or all the things that come with it. You know, but the island, I think today, that one of the best things I can say is that, you know, we have been able to maintain that charm and character that people really like about Dauphin Island. You know, for those that either have been here or maybe haven't been here, I always say that I think people enjoy as much what we don't have as much versus what we do have. And that just means that, you know, our, you know, claim to fame is the Sunset Capital of Alabama. That's pretty telling in itself. And so we just encourage people to come and feed their souls.
Well, we want to talk about some of your efforts tonight in responsible development and learn more about the impact of, you know, rising sea level and all that and that resilience. So thank you for joining us tonight. We really
thank you for having me.
And one of the stars of the talk in Fairhope was Dr. George Crozier, who's with us tonight. How many times, James, did we say the water temperature at the Dauphin Island Sea Lab? I bet we said that 16 million times in our weather careers.
17.2 million.
Somewhere along the way, he got to be the director of the Dauphin Island Sea Lab twice. Talk about that organization and its important role in our state's you know, environmental coast along the coastline, Dr.
Thanks, Bill. The lab is indeed perhaps very unique in its location. Most of the laboratory was acquired as part of an abandoned Air Force base. That sounds a little odd, but it was part of the radar system that linked the coast. And so there were dormitories there and buildings, and they had the main radar system that was there. And ironically enough, they also had a rather extensive communication system on the beach side with the building there. And we hadn't paid that much attention to it until after Frederick. And the storm there created so many problems, perhaps the largest of which was taking out the 1955 bridge, which in itself is unique in the sense that that was a used bridge bought from Germany. It was a drawbridge. And I think a lot of people remember with some affection, the original bridge was low, also contributing to the eventual problems because the oystermen used to be able to, and Jeff would remember this, they could pull up to the bridge and climb off onto the bridge to walk over and get a bite to eat at Cedar Point, or if they were going to go back to the island. But at any rate, the Air Force Base provided a tremendous opportunity to the state in the sense of the facilities that it had. It had a cafeteria, had dormitories, had buildings. And one building, interestingly enough, was all but atomic bomb proof because that had to be according to the military. And that became our Marine Science Hall, and the dormitories became places that students from all over the state came. Not only through the membership, there was a consortium formed of 17 colleges and universities. Almost every university in the state belonged to the original consortium, and the presidents were a board of directors of this consortium, which technically is a not-for-profit that owns the property itself for the state of Alabama. It was interesting, I'll never forget, there was a meeting of the board, the first meeting of the board in Governor Wallace's office. And I can remember the governor proclaiming that he had never seen all of the presidents in one place at the same time before. And that was not only the first time, it was also the last time that all of the presidents were in one place at one time. Because the interest ranges from small schools to Auburn and the University of Alabama and the University of South Alabama, which was also brand new at about the same time. But we dedicated ourselves to education, and so we're fond of saying it's a K through PhD program. And that has been our intention, to provide those services to the state of Alabama through the consortium and the laboratory that belongs to this unique corporation.
So, Mayor, talk a little bit more about life. You know, you began to talk about the life before the bridge. Talk about that a little more and how the bridge came into being.
Well, you know, of course, before the bridge, they had none of the the facilities that you would have in a developed area. I mean, they had no electricity, no running water, no plumbing, none of this stuff. And so, as it was in a lot of other rural areas. And so, they had, like, for example, a mail boat. That was the big deal of the day, for the mail boat to show up. And of course, depending on the weather, it may or may not show up that day. And so, it was a very limited back and forth. I mean, these people that were here, they just didn't get up and go to town as we do today, obviously. So they had to kind of pick and choose. They had to go by boat. And again, weather was a big factor in all of that. Most of them went over to Bila Battery. That was probably the closest mainland port that they could access. And so they did a lot of their shopping and all the things they did in that area, going to the doctor, things of that nature. And just, probably just obviously lived a quality of life that none of us will ever understand. I heard a lot of stories growing up, and as youngsters do, when you're listening to these older folks talking, you stop paying attention, and today I think about a lot and like, wow, I should have really made some notes, but obviously a fantastic way to spend some time. And again, I go back to my dad, and I keep referring to him. My dad's been dead almost 20 years now, but he was the one that talked the most about life back then. And one of the things he talked about, he said, growing up, he was 6 or 7 years old. There was one Jeep over here. Well, they let him drive the Jeep. He'd sit on one of the Coca-Cola boxes and let him drive the Jeep. And so, you can imagine why he enjoyed those times so much. And, but again, it was a great way of life. And of course, as Roberta alluded to with the flight of the frigate bird, they did have challenges, with storms, and because we didn't get the notifications back then as obviously you do now. So they had to kind of, go by their own senses and watch the weather patterns and watch these frigate birds when they came in. And that would be a tip off that there was problems in the Gulf of Mexico. And that would be their main way of knowing what might be coming their way.
And Roberta, talk about the frigate birds, because they're amazing creatures, aren't they?
They are. And what they do is they, when storms are coming, they tend to fly closer to the shore. If they float on the warm updrafts, and that the frigate bird has always been a bellwether of impending storms. And so that was the Doppler radar, if you will, back in the day, for letting people know that there was bad weather in the Gulf, as I believe Tony Del Cambri says in the film.
I read somewhere that they can stay aloft for days at a time. Is that right?
What's that?
I read that they can stay aloft for days at a time.
They can. So they're pretty phenomenal creatures. And
So,
they're
so now when you see Jim Cantori show up, you know that you're in trouble.
Right.
In addition to the
When you see
frigate
Jim
bird.
Cantori and a frigate bird, you know you're in real trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah, if they both show up in the same place, you're in big trouble. There's no question, no question about it. So, but we've talked about Frederick for a second, but hurricanes have played a big role on the island. Talk about some of the other ones. I mean, obviously, I think we underestimate the impact that Katrina had on the island, don't we? Who wants to talk about that for a second?
Well, I can start. I can chime in and say, first of all, in my lifetime, I did live through Hurricane Frederick, and it was by far the worst impacts that I've seen in my lifetime here on the island. And, you know, Dolphin Island took a direct hit. Obviously, as you just alluded to, Hurricane Katrina also created a lot of problems, but the issues with Katrina were mostly down on the what we call the west end area of the island. The area is more susceptible to storm surge, things of that nature. And I think in Katrina, we lost about 350 homes in that particular area. And of course, the year before, we had Hurricane Ivan, where we had another 150 or 200 at that point. And so, you know, it doesn't take, unfortunately, as we found out, it doesn't necessarily take a direct hit for us to feel the effects. And that's becoming more and more the case as the island has degraded over time, and we see it, you know, happening more and more, that the much weaker storms create bigger problems, and that's kind of seems to be the trend.
George, any other hurricanes you want to chime in and talk about, or are those specifically?
Jeff, let me ask you a question, because I'm not entirely sure myself. It seemed to me that one of the differences with Katrina was that massive storm surge, which went up in the bay. And I heard a lot of complaints, more than usual, from the east end of the island because of flooding that came from the north. Am I wrong in that? Nobody ever seems to worry about the east end, and I'm not sure that I'm accurate in remembering that.
Well, no, you're exactly right, Dr. George. And again, that is another thing that we're seeing. You know, the effects from storms are not necessarily coming from the Gulf. Obviously, that's where the most effects seem to come from. But much smaller storms recently, like Nate, that was only 75, 85 miles an hour, that came close to here. And I lived in the main village area, and we had, I think, a knee deep of salt water, which came from the north side. And so, yes, the island is more and more vulnerable around the full island these days, and patterns seem to be changing, and there's no question of that. But yeah, you're right. In those, we did have effects coming from the north as well as the Gulf.
There's some interesting papers that are being published out of LSU now that talk about the impact not only of that receding storm surge, but also almost new recognition, I think, in my mind, of the problems with the winter storms. They're talking about how it redistributes the sand on the north side of the barrier island. And the result of all this seems to be, I think, that had long been the conventional wisdom, that the sand just sort of rolled over from the front to the back, and it didn't lose too much, it just moved. But they're pointing out that there seems to be some net loss because of the role of the northern storms taking the sand off what was a new beach or marsh, you know, on the north side, and shoving it into the sound itself. And I just read some of this, so I'm not real familiar with it, but it makes sense to me. I understand what they're saying.
And when you were talking, you know, when we were doing the pre-show a week or so ago, Dr. George, about, you know, how the island, you know, is shifting over time because it is a barrier island. I was really amazed to see how many lots are just gone. They're underwater. What happens to those lots when you know, when they're reclaimed by the sea?
Jeff, he asked me then, and I wasn't sure. Are they still paying property tax for them?
Yeah, they are. I mean, I think, you know, technically, what over the years is that when land goes underwater, it becomes owned by the state. But the state has never really flexed its muscle in that. And as Dr. George just alluded to, most, if not all, of the property owners continue to pay their property taxes. And of course, it's very minimal. I mean, I've heard some say it's as little as $10 or $15 year. And so they just choose, you know, for whatever the reasons, to hang on to those particular parcels. And that's kind of where we are today in most of those.
There's a really telling image or video in the film of a home that is almost entirely out in the water in the Gulf.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about that for a moment. And it looked like it was being buttressed by seawalls. And is that why it's still there?
I guess that would be partly why it's there, yes. And you know, those seawall, if you will, which is, I guess it has now become that. You know, when they were first built, that house was more upland than it is now. Those walls were built prior to it emerging, if you will, into the Gulf waters. And so that's how it got put in place as it was. You know, a lot of people ask about that. And so it was properly permitted at the time. Of course, there are rules and regulations in place that disallow those types of structures being placed in the water at the time. That falls under the Corps of Engineers guidelines, as well as ADEM and some others.
Roberta, you said if some of those landowners wait long enough, that their land may be back above water at some point. But don't hold your breath, huh?
Not if you keep putting bulkheads around your property. I think the biggest challenge is that Dolphin Island is a barrier island. And so by its very nature, it's a very dynamic system. And you see in the film how the footprint of the island has changed and shifted over time. You know, sometimes the sand is rolling over, sometimes the west end breaks off from the east end, but it all happens in geologic time. And so, you know, generally speaking, the west end is a sand spit, and it probably shouldn't have been built on. And it was not built on before the bridge was built and before you started seeing a lot of the island develop. The islanders used it, they brought their cattle down there. So it was a place where you would use it while it was there, but if a storm was coming, you could easily take everything off of the west end and bring it to the east end, or the safer part of the island. With all of this construction that's gone on the west end, the dilemma is that's created a very valuable revenue source for Dolphin Island. And so you can't just say, well, let's get rid of all the houses on the west end, because they actually serve a tourism purpose, a revenue purpose for the town of Dolphin Island. And the dilemma is, with all that construction, you're trying to hold a piece of land in place that is not meant to stay in one place. And so people, you know, continue to pay their property tax in the hopes that either the town will come in or the federal government will come in and restore the beach and they'll be able to reclaim their property, or that you can, if you go out into the water now on the Gulf side of the west end of Dolphin Island, there are sandbars that will, over the next 20 or 30 years, slowly, potentially build back the west end. The challenge is Jeff, how many seawalls are there on the west end now? 3 or 4?
I think it's about 3 or 4. That's about
and
all.
And those seawalls aggravate the erosion and the erosive forces. So what we do know is that bulkhead on the very far end of the west end has caused that beach to the west of it to disappear and to erode away. And so now the town is constantly faced with having to rebuild back a beach that would not have eroded the way it has now.
There's probably deep irony when we think back, Jeff. You know, this was before my time and almost yours too. But you know, the access to the bridge was essential, and the construction of the bridge, or the movement of the bridge from Germany, was the Mobile Chamber of Commerce. That should have given us a hint right there what the purpose was. And I think Roberta's right about it. The problem that I think we foresee at this point is that as long as the sea level rise is real, the idea of the sandbars welding back to the beach, it becomes an uphill struggle, literally. And I think that's why I used to start my lectures with the landscape architect students from Auburn by saying, you know, today might be the last day of sea level rise, but that's purely hypothetical, and it doesn't seem to be the case. And it's very hard to understand how we can deal with the dilemma, because the feds are, I think they have essentially cut the West End off, as near as I could tell from the various documents. They put the dune barriers back up, but only enough to protect the town's infrastructure, which makes perfect sense to me. But it left the people on the south side of this protective dune system awfully exposed, and I'm not sure that they're eligible technically for federal help. I'm not sure, because you never know what Congress will do when there is an emergency.
So what is that situation, Mayor, for those folks? Are they unprotected now?
No, I think what he just finished with is probably accurate. You never know until something happens and Congress takes action. I think that's really kind of where it is. But we just got word today, actually, that the new flood maps for the island will be coming out in June. They'll finally be formalized. And so we've been waiting on those for a couple of years. So, things are obviously changing. I think, you go back to Dr. George mentioned about the original bridge, and the fact that the Mobile Chamber is the one that actually had developed the island. And of course, when they did that, they had to, when they subdivided the island, they tried to come up with as many lots as possible, because when they sold them, a lot of that money went back into the actual construction of the bridge. So that was kind of what they were dealing with. And I always jokingly tell folks, that, look, you can't hold that against me, because that was 8 years before I was born. People can blame me for a lot of stuff, but you can't blame me for something that happened before I was born. But in all seriousness, in dealing with it as an elected official and dealing with it in today's world, what I can tell you is, in parts of the island, it's not just there. That's probably the most vulnerable area, but we've got areas on the east end now, on the Gulf, that are also facing the same issue. And so what we deal with on the ground as an elected official is, you have folks who have homes in these places that are quite vulnerable, and it's very challenging for us to maintain and provide the services that they require and demand, because after all, they're paying their taxes, and they are citizens, and they are homeowners. And so it puts the town and the Water and Sewer Authority in a situation to where we're trying to maintain normalcy in area. When I say normalcy, I'm talking about maintain normalcy of services, whether even the roadway, the drainage, water and sewer, all of those, electricity, all of those things that people demand and require and deserve. It is very, very challenging for us to maintain those kinds of services in a changing environment.
Talk about beach renourishment for a minute, because that's not cheap. And at what point does it get out of balance with some sort of mitigation or buyout and just retreating?
Yeah, well, and there aren't a lot of good answers. Beach nourishment, as you said, is very expensive. And retreat as a whole, I mean, they're none of these things come with a real easy, cheap price tag. Of course, as a mayor, I've throughout my history with the town, I've done what I could do and continue to try to promote for, beach nourishment, stabilization, doing things that would help protect the island. And you got to remember where I'm coming from. Yeah, I'm a mayor, but I'm also an island native, and it tugs at my heart, to see the island, if not, going away, it is certainly shifting. And so I just don't like to see it as a human. And of course, as in the mayor's role, it means other things. Roberto alluded to the fact that there's a lot of, revenue comes out of that area. Yeah, it costs money to help maintain it, but we are in the ecotourism business, and people enjoy coming here. And that's 95% of the homes that are in this area that we're talking about are indeed rental properties. And so you got all these things challenging each other. Another thing that happened, in Hurricane Katrina, we talked about losing homes, but what also happened in Hurricane Katrina was the island itself got breached. We had about a 1.5 mile breach in the westernmost portion of Dolphin Island. Fortunately, it was beyond the developed part of the island. But what that got us thinking is like, gee whiz, suppose that would have happened in the developed part of the island. And so what we did, we have a comprehensive plan in place. We immediately put in some language in there to make sure that we understood that we have to create an economic sustainability part of the island and in a more protected part of the island, so that in the event something catastrophic happens, the island will be sustainable so that we can continue to provide the services that people deserve and require. And so that came out of that. And so we're doing a lot of different things now. We just passed a tree ordinance, or I should say we amended the tree ordinance to make it a little bit better. We've also just recently passed a dune protection ordinance. And so we're doing a lot of things now that we didn't do in the future, and we're getting better at it. And so I think, you know, Roberta has told us a few times that we're kind of ahead of the curve compared to other communities in the area, and that's good to know. But you know, time's not necessarily on our side, so we've got to keep working to strike that balance between, you know, man and nature.
What would some of that new responsible development look like? What sort of projects are sort of are out there now on the boards, Mayor, to maybe come true?
Well, it just so happens, you know, with the 2010 oil spill, there's a tremendous amount of funding available that can help go to things like this, and we've been fortunate enough to receive, or it's in the pipeline, dollars for economic development. And there's a lot of different dollars. Some of them we've gotten money to purchase properties and maintain it in its natural state. And so we've done a lot of different things. But the big thing that we're really pushing is the economic development of what we call Aloe Bay, which is on the north side of the island. It's in the more central part of the island. And so we want to create a bit of what I've called a river walk. If you will, some of you folks have probably been to river walks. Obviously, it will be on a Dauphin Island scale. But again, it's trying to put those types of economic anchors in areas that are hopefully going to weather the next big storm, so that the island is not, you know, really reeling after a major hurricane.
Yeah, that's exciting to hear, because that's good stuff. Roberta, put it in scale for us between, you know, renourishment and mitigation. You know, there's some point that the economic returns probably, you know, make one more important than the other. Talk about that for a second. Put it in perspective for us.
Well, I think, you know, Jeff made a good point about balance. You know, you can't divest of the West End without recognizing the value that the West End has to the rest of the community. And so to be able to establish new ways of generating income for the island, and as those activities build and begin to become sustainable revenue sources, then you can look at different ways on how to handle the West End. Beach renourishment is going to be a challenge no matter what, because of all of those people that have been paying their taxes for their properties that are underwater. When you use public dollars to renourish a beach, there are some requirements related to public access. So you can't just put a bunch of sand across the West End to protect the West End without getting into some legal ramifications of those property owners that have been paying their taxes on their lots. You're now putting public dollars and sand on private lots. So it's very complicated, and it also takes a lot of time, which, you know, with each June or even May, sometimes that rolls around now, you know, we're thrust back into hurricane season. And one thing I've learned in my days of living in Alabama is it's not if, but when. When is the next hurricane going to hit our area? And we have been really lucky so far, because even though the island does get affected by really just major rainstorms now, the town has to kick into gear to maintain its infrastructure on the West End. We haven't had a Katrina or an Ivan, you know, in almost 15 years. So that's given the town a lot of time to really think about how to plan for the future and the next inevitable storm, if you will. So when it comes to beach renourishment, you know, Jeff, what is it, 60 million?
Well, yeah, I mean,
7 years maybe.
Yeah, it depends on the amount. I mean, obviously, the more sand you put, the bigger the beach you make, the more expensive it is. And but yeah, it's high dollar. There's no question it's high dollar. And the other thing about renourishment, you know, obviously, it's not a one-time fix. It's something that you do, and then there's a certain amount of maintenance that you have to do. And if you do get a big storm after that, you're going to have to do a major amount of maintenance. So, you know, there, like I said, that's a challenge. The one thing I have been pushing for quite a number of years, and it's just never really happened, although I would say the Corps recently did shift their disposal site. But, you know, we've got the ship channel, and I've always felt like we're really wasting a resource there. You know, they have to clean the channel out. They have to get rid of this beach quality sand. And what we've been doing is dumping it offshore about 5 miles, which is essentially lost from the system. And so we've been really trying to twist arms and get folks to look at it and say, you know, we really need to be better stewards of a tremendously valuable resource and put that sand where it will be more beneficial to Dauphin Island. Now, you know, would that have solved, or would that have totally changed the scope of what we're dealing with now? Maybe not, but it would have at least delayed what we're dealing with now. And that's been an unfortunate issue that I've been really working on for a number of years. And as I said, we'll give the Corps credit that they have now extended their disposal site a little bit closer to Dauphin, and more toward Dauphin Island. And we'll see if that brings a little bit of relief.
That just kind of
that
surprises me, Dr. George. I was going to ask you, why would that be? Why would they have done that when seems like a pretty obvious solution?
Well, it is a matter of dollars. Jeff has been struggling with a truly Sisyphean task because they keep rolling the rock down every storm that comes in. He tries to roll it back up. And, you know, Jeff, one of the things that I worry the most about is, you know, the things that you like, and I think everyone that knows the island likes, is that it's different from Gulf Shores. You know, it is a place to go and relax, and it's safe and it's not crowded. On the other hand, Gulf Shores, I mean, Alabama has terrible property taxes as far as I'm concerned. And the difference that I see is that Gulf Shores and Orange Beach, they've stacked the properties on top of each other. But the island mentality is we don't want to do that. So they're kind of locked in an insoluble problem. Something's going to have to change, because I always thought that one of the best things that we heard after Katrina, I think, was Greg Leatherberry from Baldwin County, who suggested that we allow some condos, you know, just west of where the 4 lanes stopped. You know, that's relatively stable there, and increase the amount of money that was received by the community, by the state and local community, by stacking the properties up. But they don't, I don't want to drive over the bridge and see a 14-story condo either. You know, I'm just as ambivalent about it as anybody else. And I don't know the solution. Now, to answer Bill's question, the Corps will do anything that Congress tells them to do it, but the law requires a local contribution. And if they bring the sand, or if they bring the material from the channel in closer, that's a good thing. But it's expensive because a lot of that cleaning material is not beach quality sand. Some of it is. So the light stuff, you're paying for, what am I trying to say, Jeff? You're paying for a ton of silt that isn't going to stay hardly any length of time. So it becomes expensive to do it. And I don't know that there'll ever be a lack of requiring of a local match in doing these projects. The Congress is not populated by Alabama legislators.
And so that talks about the further question of federal dollars, and federal dollars are going to bailing out our landowners along the coast all the way from Maine to Texas. Is that part of the problem?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, there's a recent book out, The Risk of Geography by Gil Gall. I don't know if you got a copy, Jeff, but it's well done. But I thought it awfully ironic that he has a chapter in there talking about Dauphin Island being the most dangerous or the worst place. But he spends about 2/3 of the book on Sandy Hook, or the Hurricane Sandy, and what it did on the Northeast and what it cost those communities, because there were a lot more people obviously affected by those storms. But yeah, it's very difficult to see the economies. And this is one of the things that I'm reluctant to say, but I think it's just so difficult. The pattern of development on the West End is simply not sustainable in a technical sense of the word, because they're not making enough, the town's not making enough money on it to keep redoing the beaches, and the people don't want to pay more property taxes, and they don't want to build condos. I got no solution to it. I'm sorry, Jeff. If I had, I would have told you 20 years ago.
No, you've done a good job describing where I find myself a lot of times, you know, and it's like you say, with the shoreline restoration projects, one of the things the Corps looks at is cost benefit ratio. And what Dr. Crozier is said very well is the fact that, our annual budget is a little less than $4 million, where the annual budget is probably $40 million. So, there's a lot more cost benefit, but also, as he accurately said, our community, no offense to those communities, they're great places, but our people, they don't want us to be like that. They want us to be like we are. In fact, recently, I've had a bit of an uprising just because we've had a lot of new homes being built. People are getting a little antsy because we're building so many residential homes at this point. And so that just gives you a little taste of it. And all that being aside, when you look at Dauphin Island and compare and mostly contrast it to Gulf Shores, Orange Beach, really it sets up, it's really a very positive thing for the state, because the state has such diverse communities, yet in such close proximity, that creates places for people to go that have different tastes. We get a certain segment of the visitors, they get the others, and now we're connected with a state-run ferry, which allows them to more easily see the other side, if you will. And I think it's really a positive thing for the state of Alabama to have those contrasting communities so that we're not all alike. That's one of the things that people like about Dauphin Island, is that we're different. We're the way vacations used to be when I was a kid. They'd load up the station wagon and go to the beach, and you make your own fun. Doing nothing is a good thing. And so that's what we're proud of. And yeah, it's becoming more and more of a challenge, and we're taking steps to try to maintain ourselves and sustain ourselves, which we have to do. And we realize we have vulnerabilities, and so some of this stuff is just going to have to come out in the wash. I hate to use that analogy, but we can't control every single thing right now. We can do what we can do and do the best we can, but some of it is beyond our control as we speak.
So is it a good thing or a bad thing when the HGTV crews come rolling into town? Mayor, what did everybody think about that? Because it looks awfully inviting on channel 1037 or whatever it is on
yeah, I mean, I would say probably a lot of the people would say they wish they would stay out of here, and quit.
Kind of like Jim Cantori.
But, I'll say this, and again, I separate myself between an island native and a mayor. And as a mayor, yeah, it's great, it's good, I guess. But honestly, I'm proud of our community. I'm proud of our community as an island native. And I want people to come and enjoy. When you look around at what's going on in the world today and all the craziness that's going on, I'm just happy that we can provide a place for people to go and get away from it all and just chill out and relax and enjoy life. And I'm really proud that we can offer that to families, and we get a lot of families. And so that makes me feel good. It really does. I mean, I grew up here as a small child, and it makes me feel good anytime I see a small child enjoying what Dauphin Island has to offer.
And those young people and children are going to lead us in the future. How important is education, Dr. Crozier, in that regard?
Well, obviously, I think it's the key to almost everything. And that I was just going to comment to Jeff. My understanding, although I haven't seen anything formal, I've been gone a number of years now, but I understand that they have named the aquarium on the island as the State Aquarium, which I think is pretty cool. But it's also a Dauphin Island scale aquarium.
That's correct.
and they do enjoy it, But the intention of, as I said, our mission initially, I think, started out as being undergraduate and graduate education as a research facility there at the laboratory. But from the very beginning, and I was looking at a piece that I wrote a long time ago about the first classes that I took out were actually started at Point of Pines before that laboratory burned. And we used a little fishing boat called the Mickey's Fin, and I took classes from Davidson out, first high school trips. And of course, that's grown into one of the largest high school programs in the nation now, one of the few that still gives high school credit for a summer there at the lab. So we're very sincere, Bill, about a K through PhD kind of program. And I think it has meant a lot. We do, there are probably something in the neighborhood of 70, 80,000 visitors to the aquarium a year. And most of those are children. They really are. I mean, we've got a kind of a a fixed audience because we bring so many children and teachers to the lab, but they come back. I get comments on Facebook, and a few times I look at Facebook, this place they want to go every year they come, they want to go. And they've tried to update it more or less constantly, but it's still small, very small. But it is the intention. The education is by far has been the backbone of the laboratory.
If you got if you got children who are interested in marine science, Dr. Crozier, how do you get them to take advantage of that program? How do they sign up or get recruited for it or whatever?
Well, Bill, we push this with all the schools throughout the state. Over a couple of years, every county in the state visits the laboratory, and they get introduction to what's going on there. And one of the stories I told recently, when we started this in 1979 or thereabouts, the vast majority of the kids that came from the upper part of the state had never seen a microscope before. And Troy University had given us a suite of old-fashioned antique microscopes. That's all we had when we started. But that has grown now, and now they're building robots in the swimming pool at the lab, with video on them and using their phones and the whole 9 yards, all the stuff that's kind of a mystery to me. But they seem to enjoy it, and we're trying to make it as attractive as we can. And we've always said, if you wanted to teach about waves, you can do it with an oscilloscope in a laboratory, or you could do it standing in the surf on Dauphin Island. I think I'll take the Dauphin Island version.
Every day of the week, that's for sure. So we're vitally interested in hurricanes on here. And if you were there, were you on the island the night Frederick came ashore in September?
No, I'm not that dumb, Bill. No. We did have a faculty member that went through Frederick out there, and it was pretty scary. I guess he and Jeff, I think he and in Ship and Shore, I think there were 4 or 5 of you crazy people under the counters in Ship and Shore. You weren't one of them. I wasn't.
Did you evacuate, Mayor, before the hurricane?
Yeah, I did with my family. I was just graduated high school, and we went up. We stayed at I think it was Ramada Inn at Airport I-65, and the way it turned out there, we may as well have stayed home. But yeah, we were off the island at that point.
That's probably pretty close to where you were that night, James Spann.
I was at Azalea Middle
television.
I was at Azalea Middle School in Mobile, and back then we had no satellite trucks, we had no internet, and they wanted me near a working phone. So I'm thinking, so we stayed in Mobile instead of going down to the Gulf Coast to be near a working phone so I could call in during the 10 o'clock news. That's how we did a live shot back in 1979. But I was going to ask Mayor Jeff, Mayor, what do you do now? Let's say you have another category 3 or higher hurricane approaching.
Hurricane Michael.
I assume you evacuate the whole island, or do you?
Well, actually, the governor makes that call. We encourage people to leave, but we can't require them to leave. And so there's always people that stay. I kind of have my own wind threshold. That's usually like 100 miles an hour. If it's below that, at 100 or less, I'll stay. But no, we do encourage people to leave. Now, we do, particularly in the more vulnerable parts of the island, we will really get out there and try to get those people out of the way. But at the end of the day, they're on it's their decision.
How many were there during Ivan on the island, do you think?
Oh, I would say maybe could be 100 or more.
Whew, goodness gracious.
And what I've seen is, unfortunately, it's a bit of a scary trend. It used to be almost everybody would leave. And then as I've seen the time go by, more and more people are staying. In fact, in Hurricane Katrina, a good lady friend of mine was in her home by herself. She was almost 90 years old, stayed there by herself. And the bad part is, even if the hurricane doesn't get you, if you have a health issue or something, you don't have anybody to help you. And so, but unfortunately, people choose to stay because they know a lot of times if they leave, they may not be able to get back because of the causeway or bridge or something like that. And so a lot of them make this decision to stay because they don't want to get caught off the island.
One of the things I think that's made a difference, Bill, is that the people are better educated and better informed up to a point. And as long as, if they think they're on the quote good side of the storm, they're more inclined to stay. And Ivan was seen as a Pensacola hurricane or Orange Beach or whatever, and so they gamble and they don't pay enough attention to how the cone can move a little bit and make so much difference to them. I mean, but I guess it's a testament to paying some attention to what we've been trying to tell them for 25 years or so.
Although I would also add that I think there are a lot of people that live on the island now that haven't lived through a hurricane. And so you hear about hurricane parties, or, there's this thrill of experiencing a hurricane. And so when we talk about education, yes, it's important to educate the children, but it's also important to educate the residents that live on Dolphin Island today, because most of them are not even from the Gulf Coast.
No. And the other problem, Roberta, is what we deal with more so lately is these smaller storms like we had this summer. We have, as we talked about the West End, like I said, 95% of those homes are rental properties. They're full, and they're full of people from other places. And of course, they're here like, woohoo, we're going to get to ride out a storm, even though it may be 40 mile an hour, 60 mile an hour. I mean, their life is not at risk, but what we have to get them to do is move their vehicles out of the low areas, because they'll wake up the next day and their car will be submerged in sand and salt water. And so it's a task, and we have to coordinate with our real estate companies that do a pretty good job of reaching out and getting messages out to these people, and we'll shuttle their vehicles, take them back to the house. And that gets a little dicey, because we kind of, it ends up in my lap really, that we kind of look at the storm, look at the direction and the intensity, and try to make an informed decision on how to deal with this island full of people that have never been in a storm. So it is challenging, and but it's something that fortunately we've had a pretty good handle on lately. I've been proud of the results, but it's a challenge.
I'm curious about Hurricane Camille, Mayor. You probably were a young person then. Did y'all leave the island that night?
Yes, we did. We actually, it was another funny, we actually left the island and went and stayed with my dad's sister, who lived in Grand Bay. So we actually went closer to the storm. I remember as an 8-year-old the next day getting up, and they had a wagon, and we pulled it around the yard and picked up shingles all day long. So yeah, that was where I was.
Talk about Biola Battery for a minute, because you referred to it as the place where, before the bridge was there, maybe that was where everybody went to. That is an especially vulnerable community also, isn't it?
Well, it is. And of course, Dolphin Island as a barrier island gives it some level of protection. And that's why, in the challenges that we face as an island, that's a good point. This is not, we're spending all our time talking about Dolphin Island specific, but as Dolphin Island goes, so goes the region and Biola Battery, because we're protecting them, if you will, as a barrier island. And as that barrier island diminishes, they're going to have less protection by us. And so that's just another piece of this equation.
Well, it certainly is a beautiful place. We got to go around while we were in Fairhope and enjoy different parts on that side. Didn't get over to the Mobile Bay side, but a lot of stuff going on at the top of Mobile Bay right now, isn't there, Roberta? I'm sure there's lots of issues oriented with that development that's happening in the city of Mobile. It's just exploding.
Yeah, there's a lot of development going on in the city. Well, but actually, there's a lot of development going on in Baldwin County. Across both counties, there's a lot of growth, and with a lot of growth comes a lot of environmental impacts, and that's our job, is to educate people about how we can best grow our communities while also protecting this important and unique environment that we all get to call home.
So where's the next place our viewers and listeners can see the film? The film is good. It's worth going to see.
Thank you. There are no public showings lined up right now, but the film is available on our website, www.mobilebaynep.com. You can just Google Flight of the Frigate Bird and it will come up. But we're hoping to have another round of public showings in 2020, and we'll let you know about that.
Is this something you want to get on Netflix or Hulu or one of the big streaming services, Roberta?
We've talked about it. To be honest with you, that's about my pay grade. We have actually brought in some people that know how to do that stuff. And so you may find it on Netflix or Prime Video before it's all said and done.
Or one of the other 37 new streaming services that developed in the last 2 weeks.
There
And
you
see,
go.
they've all got to have content. So charge him $50 million. I mean, just
There you
you
go,
know,
Mayor. There you go. There's a chance. Build some revenue.
hey, Jeff, what is your vision for Dauphin Island in 20 years?
Well, I think mainly to continue what we're doing now, essentially, and that is, we've always had this phrase controlled growth. I think by all accounts, be that whether people live here or even the visitors that visit here, they routinely tell me, don't change anything, don't mess it up. And so what they're saying is they want Dauphin Island to remain essentially the way we know it today. Now there's going to be change and there's going to be growth, but what they're saying is don't turn it into some of the other metropolises, if you will, along the coast in both directions. And so that's what we're doing. And right now it's working. As I said, ecotourism is our big cash cow. Right now we're able to be sustainable and yet be the kind of community that people want us to be. And so that's a great combination, and that we're going to try to keep doing that as long as we can.
I think your intentions with regard to Aloe Bay are the greatest hope, Jeff, in so many ways. I mean, and if you combine that with the Sea Grant programs in the working waterfront, that is always fun, and people like seeing it and those things. That's one of the things I'm really proud of. That came out of that studio from Auburn, the landscape architects that played with the ideas on the island, and I really do think they saw it right. I think it was a good compromise, a way to go that would not jeopardize the life on the island. In fact, in some ways, it would bring it back to the way the island was when your folks were there with fishermen and fisher things and stuff that would work that way.
I was in Mobile during Frederick and came back the next day in a helicopter and saw that bridge that was built in 1955, gone. And goodness, I'm thinking, will this thing survive? And of course it did. The question is, if you could tell Jeff, let's say, and we have a big audience, these are weather freaks that listen to this show, that maybe they're in Oregon or in Wisconsin and they're interested. What would you tell them? Do you think that you would feel welcome as an outsider that comes in to spend a week at Dauphin Island? Where would you stay and what would you do?
Well, we welcome everybody. Obviously, I said earlier that it makes me feel good to see families come and enjoy what Dauphin Island has to offer, and I truly mean that. And of course, we're in the tourism business, so we do rely on that. And it's up to the individuals. Birding is big industry on Dauphin Island. So you got some people that do that would want to stay in a place in the wooded area. They want to stay at one of the bed and breakfasts. If you got people that's coming to hit the beach and do a little fishing or a little surfing or whatever, then they're going to probably want to stay on the Gulf or on the water. Then you've got some back bays. So that's one of the really nice parts of the island. It's not a one size fits all. And so people can pick and choose where they want to go and what they're most interested in. And yet we have, as we've talked about, the estuarium at the Sea Lab. It's a great place to stop in. We've got historic Fort Gaines. We've got all kinds of things for folks to just come and enjoy. But as I said, the best thing we have is you can just come and do nothing, just kind of hang out, chill out, turn off the cell phone and enjoy life the way it used to be.
And let me just say, for those that have never been there before, it's so different. Understand, this is not a Destin. This is not a Gulf Shores. This is not an Orange Beach. You don't see these miles and miles of these high-rise buildings. You just see quaint structures where to me it's a very, and let me just say this too, for the residents, the permanent residents that are there, every time I've been there, I have felt welcome. I have not had one bad experience. I don't think I've even met a mean person on the island. There's got to be one somewhere down there.
It's hard to be mean.
He probably calls you, Mayor, about something, but it has been the most marvelous, welcoming experience. I felt safe. I felt relaxed, and there is some peace, something there, an intangible that you can't describe, that you don't get. And again, I love, Southern Baldwin. It's great, but there's just something different, and I think a lot of people are yearning for that these days.
Well, I think one of the things is the fact that our businesses on the island, all but 2 of them are locally owned and operated. And most of them have been owned and operated by the same family for quite a few years. We've got a Circle K that has a Subway, and we've got a Chevron. Everything else on the island is locally owned and operated. And that's something that's very unique these days. I tell people jokingly, we don't even have a dollar store. And that's saying something in Alabama. But I think that gives people a little feel of it. And it's a bedroom community. It's a residential community. We've got a little red schoolhouse on the island that they have about 75 kids at K through 5. That just kind of helps paint the picture of us, as I say again, what we are, but more so what we're not. We've got a handful of condominiums. Our height restriction on buildings is 85 feet, 5 stories, 85 feet. And so those are the kind of things that you see here. And, again, we have set aside a tremendous amount of property that will remain that way forever. It will never be developed. And as I say, people tell me day in and day out. And the other thing I can say, we don't have a traffic light. That's another claim to fame. We don't have, our main intersection is a 3-way stop sign. And voters tell me all the time, if you ever put up a traffic light, I'll never vote for you again. So therefore we have no traffic lights, right? So, but it's fantastic community. It's a great place, whether you live here, visit here, or work here. It's fantastic for all the reasons and more that I've said. And I'd really encourage people to come and experience it.
The only thing I can say,
one of the things, Jim, is you have to understand that it also has the first Mardi Gras parade of the season.
Yeah.
And a great deep sea fishing rodeo too, also, isn't it?
Yeah, deep sea fishing rodeo, right? It's like it's 85 years old now, and we've got a sailing regatta that's up around 60 years old. And
now, a couple of years ago, did that get affected by a storm in the summer?
Yeah, it sure did. It was tragic. We actually lost 6 sailors. We had the storm roll through here, and the winds were up 90, 100 miles an hour just out of the blue. And it sank a tremendous amount of vessels. And unfortunately, we lost, like I said, about 6 sailors, individuals, and, would have lost a lot more than that had it not been for response crews and some of the other boaters that helped save each other. So yeah, it was quite tragic at that event.
Mayor, the only bone we have to pick with you, the park superintendent at Cheaha State Park wants to talk to you about this claim that you have the best sunsets in Alabama.
Okay. All right.
I'm just saying we ought to have a sunset competition with photographs from Dauphin Island and Cheaha State Park. And for those that don't know, that's the highest mountain in the state. And we'll see who's the winner there. But I will say the sunsets are stunning this time of the year when the sun goes down over the Gulf side. It's just remarkable.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thanks for your time. I know that you all have been here for an hour. So first off, George, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, or you got a website or a social media account, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
I don't want to be in touch.
You don't want to get off my lawn.
I had to retire twice to get used to it.
Get off my beach.
Get off.
They can find me through the Sea Lab.
And again, you can just search Dauphin Island Sea Lab, and it's I see so many kids take field trips down there, and it's a marvelous facility. Dr. Blackwell, I met him down there one time years ago from USA, and it's just great. So, Roberta, again, if somebody wants to watch your film, give that website one more time.
Flight of the Frigate Bird is the name of the movie, and it is www.mobilebay, N as in national, E as in estuary, P as in program.com.
Awesome. And Jeff, for anybody interested in Dauphin Island, what's the best way they can find out information about places to stay and things to do?
Yeah, best way to go is a one-stop shop is go to the town's website. That's townofdauphinisland.org. And there's lots of links and things in there, but I'll give everybody fair warning. There's a thing when you come to Dauphin Island and you get sand in your shoes, you'll always come back.
All right. I like it. Well, thanks to all of you for being on the show this week. It's been a great show, and I look forward to, I can't wait till the summer till we go. You don't have to go in the summer. That's the other thing. Winter's a cool time to go down there. It really is. But again, thanks to all of you, and y'all have a great week, and we appreciate the time you gave us this week. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. I've got a hankering now for a
I'm ready to go, James.
Bill.
Let's go. Get some fried shrimp and some oysters.
Yeah. So let's do this. Let's take a quick break, and we're going to do Tony Rice and the astronomy report. We're going to come back with picks of the week and a whole lot more as WeatherBrains rolls along, so you don't go away.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
The word planet comes from the Greek planetes, which means wanderer. Ancient Greeks took note of uniform and ordered movements in what they originally thought to be stars. Astronomer Ptolemy described the movement in the 2nd century, creating a model that described the solar system, and it survived for nearly 14 centuries. Successors simply put the sun in the middle instead of Earth, but the movements remain the same. You can observe that movement yourself, just as the ancient Greeks did, and this week's a particularly good time to do it. Throughout the week, Venus will move past Saturn, low in the southwestern sky, just after sunset. Take a moment each evening to find them. You'll see Venus start a couple of degrees below Saturn, and then day by day move up and to the left, showing you that movement. By Wednesday, the two will be just 1.5 degrees apart. This apparent movement comes from Venus's trip around the sun, which takes only about 225 days. So its changing place in the night sky is very noticeable from night to night. Saturn, on the other hand, takes 29 years to complete its orbital period. That makes it essentially appear motionless against the background of stars, at least over periods of time as short as a week. All this is moving, of course, very, very fast, but it's also very far away. Saturn's nearly 8 times further away than Venus, which also explains why the much smaller Venus appears so much brighter than Saturn. Venus is currently 1.4 AU away. 1 AU is an astronomical unit, which is the average Earth-Sun distance of about 93 million miles, but Saturn's more than 10.8 AU away. So why do they appear so close together? It's all about the angles. Think of it this way. Look at the solar system overhead as if it were a clock with the sun in the middle. Earth's up around 12 o'clock, a little past there. Venus is at around 4 o'clock, and Saturn's around 5 o'clock. So we're looking down at an angle through those two. Now, Jupiter is around 6 o'clock, which is why it's so difficult right now to see Jupiter, and it only appears right after sunset, otherwise lost in the sun's glare. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
So we're doing the show on the 9th of December. We'll do a quick weather roundup. Just the two of us, Bill, down here in the deep south, down here in the southern United States, and somebody might get a little snow tomorrow night.
Yeah, and a little lightning starting to show up, James. They're southwest Columbus, Mississippi. That's going to work into our western counties before long.
Yeah, the SPC guys, they do have the chance of thunder in their convective outlook, but no severe weather. But parts of Tennessee, maybe extreme North Mississippi, North Alabama, then onto the Northeast could see some snow with this feature. But other than that, it's brutally cold up north. They've really gotten cold. Temperatures.
How about a heavy freezing spray warning, James? That sounds like the worst.
Wow, that's nasty. Where is this?
On the lakes up there in Upper Michigan. National Weather Service in Marquette has it out from the Ontonagon to the upper entrance of the Portage Canal in Michigan and around the Eagle River and down to Manitou Island. And 2 centimeters per hour. That does not sound like any fun.
No, and I saw a snow squall warning today. I don't know if that's been around. Maybe it has been, but I've never noticed it. This was from the Weather Service in the Quad Cities today.
I think they took it away for a year, and then I think they put it back. Now, I may be wrong about that. Someone could correct me, but I think they consolidated a lot of those products into one, and then they decided they needed that one back. And I think I heard that.
But it's been rough. And did you see the pile up in Des Moines, Iowa today?
That was terrible. That's my worst nightmare.
They had video, just these cars just ramming into the back of this pileup over and over and over. It was just brutal. And
I had images of that when I was driving home on 459 tonight, because our interstate bridges in Birmingham, have been closed for over a year downtown. So everybody's been routed onto our, southern beltway. And I mean, it's bumper to bumper and they're going 80 miles an hour. And I thought, it would just take one of those little winter storm bridges right there to, create a 200 car pileup in a heartbeat.
Yeah, no kidding. But anyway, other than that, things are quiet. By the way, the show title I selected, I think the mayor said this, "Doing nothing is a good thing." That really stood out. That spoke volumes to me. So that's our show title for this week.
They were
I don't
great, but I tell you, he was the last minute star of the show. Roberta added him at the last minute, and it was really fun talking with him.
Yeah, he was great. And I think a lot of people that live on the Gulf Coast or go to the Gulf Coast, maybe we're all guilty of not spending enough time there. Not that they want to be overrun with tourists, but if you want a different experience, to me, it's a lot like Cape Sandblast. I don't know if you've ever been to Cape Sandblast, which is near Indian Pass, and it's down below Panama City, between Panama City and Appalachia. It's kind of the same type situation. It's a little, peninsula, little barrier strip out there that just takes a beating from these hurricanes like Michael, but there are no, commercial businesses there. There's no high-rise buildings. It's very much like Dauphin Island. And we spent some time at Cape Sandblast last summer just to get away and to support them after Hurricane Michael. They needed an influx of tourists to kind of help there. So, But yeah, Dauphin Island is a great place. So Aubrey, I don't see her. If maybe she's tied up, we'll do email next week. We'll do a long segment. So I guess we'll just do our pick of the week. Bill, do I need to blow the foghorn on you?
Yeah, go ahead and blow it for me, and I'll cover some of the guests that are coming up.
Well, okay.
Yeah,
no, hang on. That wasn't loud enough. Hang on. That's much better. There we go.
Much better. Yeah, Matt Tanner will join us next week. We have a special show, James, on the 19th. And it may be you by yourself that night. That's the same night as my son's choir concert. So we may have to either move it or do something a little differently. So let's talk about that at some point. And then I'm looking forward to the 30th because Greg Carbon has committed for his end of the year show. That's always a fun show.
Greg's Meteorological Memories. We've had Greg on as the year ender for a long time. So again, that'll be on Monday, December 30th. And again, I will be taking way ahead of ourselves. I will be taking Christmas week off, so we're not going to do a show on the 23rd. So the 23rd show will be done most likely on Thursday, the 19th, for a Thursday night special next week, but we'll figure all that out. And my pick of the week, I don't know if you saw, our friend Marshall Shepard wrote a piece. He's a contributor to Forbes, and he wrote a piece about why in the world do people attack people in the weather enterprise and in the climate people. What's the deal with the attacks? Why can't we agree with some type of civility and propriety and decency and respect? We've lost our ability to do that, and that's a great example. And I think it's a very interesting piece. So, and again, the link to that's going to be on weatherbrains.com. And again, it just seems to be more of a problem every year. The ferocious nature of this stuff, the vitriol, the nasty, vulgar, profane stuff that you deal with, it's stunning. And I feel for some of these young women that work with me, because I'm some old guy with no feelings left to hurt. I tell you, you can't hurt my feelings. You can do whatever you want to do. You can't hurt my feelings. I don't have any feelings left. But these younger people, and especially the younger women, they have a hard time processing that. And
there was a horrible example of that this afternoon. I saw come across in Twitter. Some young meteorologist was insulted by some goofball. It's just luckily he got exposed for it. But
to me, it's not a social media problem. Kevin would argue it's a social media problem. It's a society problem.
Oh, just tell that to the traffic out there. It's not just beep, beep on the horn if somebody cuts you off. They sit on the horn for 20 seconds and then somebody gets out with a gun, and it's just a nightmare.
I mean, it is a heart problem we have with culture, and
we need an intervention, James.
Yeah, it's just, and again, I've been doing this for 41 years, and we've always had, haters, which is fine. And again, I've said this before, you have to be real careful here. Let's distinguish the haters and the trolls from constructive criticism. We desperately need constructive criticism to be better. And I'm always looking for that. But this just nasty, nasty stuff. It's just a cesspool. And, these people they're among us. I mean, you go to the Walmart and they're in there, you drive down the highway and they're driving next to you. And that's what worries me. It's just, it's odd. But anyway, Marshall wrote a piece on that, and the links will be up on weatherbrains.com.
Well, there was a great Nova, and my 12-year-old and I were watching it last night. We recorded it, but it was about, we're living in the least violent time in the history of the world. That's kind of surprising to me and seems sort of backwards to what your intuition would tell you, just because of what we're talking about tonight. But, they were talking to the importance in these, areas that are having really big problems, like, the inner cities of Baltimore, places like that. There are these people that are being trained, that come out of the communities, and their job is to just step in, and they're called violence interrupters. So, James, I think we all have to be, on the side of civility and act and, step in and interrupt these situations where we can, where it's safe to do so, because sometimes just an apology or just, hey, man, it's okay, I was wrong, can go a long way toward fixing a problem. So,
yeah. And that's the other thing. As a society, we've lost our ability to say that I'm wrong, or I could be wrong.
Exactly, because it's a sign of weakness.
We have become narcissists or something that, I cannot be wrong. Only you can be wrong. And I love it when somebody, people. Yeah, exactly. And I love it when the first thing I look for, quite frankly, is somebody with the spirit of humility, with the admission that I can be wrong here, and the ability to apologize and learn from your mistakes and move on. But hey, I'm the lead, so I got to go here. But
you got a great looking tie and some great suspenders here, James. That puts us all in the Christmas spirit.
Yeah, I was reading to these kids out at a resort here tonight, so that's the reason for the festive wear. But anyway, WeatherBrains is typically on the air every Monday night at 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central. And I think most people just kind of congregate to the YouTube channel now. There's a chat session going on over there, but you can also watch it on live.bigbrainsmedia.com. Our email address is email@weatherbrains.com. We typically do an email segment every week. We'll do a double next week with Aubrey, our email officer. And if you listen on Apple Podcast, put some comments on there, good, bad, whatever. We'd love to get those. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week, and God bless.
Awesome, James. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Have a good week. I'll talk to you tomorrow morning on the phone.
Man, thanks.
All right, bye.